Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. At 11:21 or 11:41, pardon me. Excused from the meeting, Ellen Nunra will not be here today. Kelly, you're joining us online. Welcome. Item number three, adoption of the minutes. Are there any errors or omissions of the minutes of the April 7th meeting? And if not, a motion to approve would be in order. Councillor Skanderup, thank you. All in favor of approval of the previous minutes? That is carried. Thank you. Call for post-agenda items. I have two, and are there any other? Well, I'll list the two that I have. One would be a discussion around what's happening at CDC South and the potential for an invitation for some action there relative to, I'll report on that. Secondly, appointment and discussion of a working group for the Bassano Hospital project. We have discussed that informally, but we need to formalize that. So that will be number two on post-agenda items. Are there any other post-agenda items for this today? Seeing none, we'll move to the adoption of the agenda. Amanda, all in favor of approval of the agenda? That is carried. Thank you. Question period or notice of motion. Are there any? Seeing none, we'll move pardon me, I should have mentioned this relative to the agenda, but we can deal with it as we go. Item number 8.2 will be handled at the end of the agenda following our in-camera session. And as noted, the public hearing begins at 11:30, so we will be strict with regard to starting the public hearing at 11:30. There are a number of other timed delegations happening prior to that, but for now, I'm going to suggest that we move down to item 8.3. Motion for second reading, excuse me, of Bylaw 2027-22, local improvement at the North Headgates. Who is, Matt, would you take us through that, please?
Yeah, so for council's information, we had first reading at our prior meeting. We're now to the point where you can give second and third readings to, and there's a series of these tax bylaws. On each of these bylaws, to save some time, we've received no comment back from the public on these, so council's good to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Lynette, please.
I'll make the motion for second reading, Bylaw 2027-22.
Thank you. All in favor of approval of second reading, please indicate. That is carried. Thank you. And then we need a motion for third reading. Councillor Holly Johnson, please. All in favor of approval of third reading, please indicate. That is also carried. Thank you. And moving on to item 8.4, right? Go ahead, Matt, please.
So again, here another bylaw 2028-22, local improvement for Tilley infrastructure upgrades. We had that amendment that was given first reading previous meeting, so looking for motions for second and third.
Councillor Dan Short, please.
Make a motion for second reading of Bylaw 20. That one.
Yeah, thank you. Seeing no discussion, all in favor of second reading, please indicate. That's carried. And similarly, we need a motion for third reading. Councillor Skanderup, please.
I'll make that motion for third reading.
Thank you. And all in favor of third reading, please indicate. That is carried as well. Thank you. We go to item number 8.5, the Bylaw 2029-22, tax rates.
Yeah, so just a brief update. We did make the amendment to maintain the tax rates the same as they were for 2021 for farmland, non-residential, small business. So that is what you have in front of you, the bylaw as amended, and looking for second and third reading today.
Thank you.
I'll make the
Please.
second reading, motion for second reading on 2029-22.
Thank you. All in favor, or, yeah, please, that's carried. Thank you. Motion for third reading, Greg.
I'd like to make that motion for third reading.
Thank you. Similarly, all in favor of approval of third reading, that is also carried. Thank you. Let's move to road closure to, on Northwest to 34-14-14, item number 11.1. Maria, please.
Thank you. The county was approached by the landowner of the northwest of 34-14-14. They would like to close this road allowance to allow for a corner arm system on their pivot. So they own both parcels on either side of this road allowance, and that extra infrastructure would irrigate the road allowance as well as that little sliver alongside the canal. So the lands are in Division 1. They're approximately 4.5 kilometers west of Rolling Hills. The parcels on all sides of this road allowance are in the Agriculture General Land Use District. And both sides of the road allowance are owned by the same landowner. So one thing to consider about this road allowance is that it does allow for legal access to the southwest of 34. That's this parcel here. Currently, these lands are accessed through the lands to the south along the canal and up, which is good as it is right now. In the future, should anything happen with access to that parcel, then that landowner would require access through the road allowance. So staff would recommend that council approve this road closure, or at least get it going into the process with first reading. That would allow us to circulate to the adjacent landowners and allow them to comment if there's any objections to this road closure. The other recommendation we would have, and the way the applicant would like to go, is with a lease. So the lease would allow the county to cancel this agreement within 90 days. So should something happen with the existing access to the southwest quarter, then we could reopen that road allowance and allow for access to that quarter. I think that's all the information for me. So the process would be, if council would like to proceed with this, then we will circulate to the adjacent landowners and set up a public hearing. For road closures, we would do a public hearing and then first reading if council would wish to go that route. And then we would need Alberta transportation approval. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria. Question, Holly, please.
So when I'm looking at this, should not have been leased previously, because it would not, it had been watered previously from when it was going around?
I think right now I can't really speak to what's happening, but the pivot is only on that quarter section, only on the northwest. But now they'd like to extend past the road allowance and irrigate this sliver here, so then they would be encroaching with their infrastructure onto the road allowance.
I know we're not addressing this, but look at the one that's just directly north of it. Do we have that lease on that one? Because it looks like I can't see the entire map, but they would be farming on the road allowance above on the left corner there. It looks like it's a correction line.
So this, is this the piece? This is actually not a road allowance because this is the forced, or the, it's not forced, pardon me, this is the regular road allowance, and then it comes to the correction line. So it's from this road south is where that road allowance runs. But you're right in saying if this was a road allowance, then that would need to be closed and leased to allow for that encroachment on the road allowance if that was happening.
Thank you. Further question or a motion?
A question.
Please.
Who owns what's between the road allowance and the canal? Like,
Yeah. Go ahead, Maria. Thanks.
The same, so the landowner that owns this quarter, the northwest of 34, also owns that sliver of land. So they own everything from the canal east to the property line.
and I'm ready to make the motion that we approve this with the conditions and go to first reading.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Neil?
I think the lease is the best option because you never know what's going to happen. The same guy owns them all right now. Families can split up, the quarters can go somewhere else. If we sell it, we're going to end up building roads to get down to that isolated quarter. On a long-term lease, what's the difference? If we need it, fine. If everybody gets along, cool. But I think it's a real dangerous thing to isolate that chunk of ground.
Thank you. So speaking in favor of the motion, right? Look, the motion is to close the road closure and lease.
I'm speaking against the motion. I want to lease it.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
That's the motion. The motion was to close for the road closure and lease of the property.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Dan, please.
Yeah, to speak to that, I know the landowner quite well. He doesn't want to buy it. He wants it closed and leased. That's their preferred arrangement. And yeah, I'm 110% behind this motion.
Okay. Any further questions? Ready for the motion? All in favor of the motion to close road closure and lease? Move forward with that. Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Welcome to the delegation from Bassano. You're here, and we're 5 to 11. If you're good to start early, we're in favor of that. We do have a number of other time delegations this morning. So the next one is at 10:20. So if we can be, I'm not rushing you, but that is our schedule, and we welcome you, Mayor Maury. Let's start with introductions here. Do you know everybody in the room? Maybe not. Let's start with introductions. Go ahead, Neil.
Neil Johnson, Division 10, Round Brooks.
Good morning, Amanda Philpott, Division 8, Duchess.
Good morning, Greg Screever, Division 5, Castles and Lake No Resort.
Arnold Dirksen from the GEM area, Division 9.
Holly Johnson, Division 4, Scandia, Rainier, Bow City.
Good morning, Adina Scandrip, Division 2, Tilley area.
Good morning, Dan Short, Division 1, Rolling Hills.
Hi, I'm Lynette Kopp. I'm Division 3, Patricia Millicent area.
I'm Pam Elliott, Admin Assistant Planning and Development.
I'm Emma Sinclair, and I'm doing a practicum in observing today.
Sandra Stanway, Brooks Bulletin.
Irvin, please. Yeah.
Irv Murray, Mayor Bassano.
Right, thank you. When you speak, maybe just punch the number there. We also have people online this morning. Kelly Chrisman is online, counselor from Bassano. Division 6, and Lane Johnson in the back of the room here. Welcome to our meeting this morning to present recreation proposal or situation in Bassano. The floor is yours. We've talked about a bit of a time frame, but welcome here, and we welcome your presentation this morning.
Okay, well, I'll try to make my part quick. Just want to thank you, everyone here, for allowing us to present this update on recreation and how much we value our partnership. I want to acknowledge that the management of recreation poses many challenges, and you know, I know you guys know all about that, and as well as opportunities for both of our communities. However, the underlying message is that recreation is a key driver for viable communities, and it attracts economic development and promotes the region. With the county's endorsement of our Recreation and Leisure Master Plan in last year in 2021, we did begin to implement all the tactics in that, starting this year. Our initial implementation plan has 3 main tactics. One is to engage with the user groups, update the user agreements, and develop and implement ways to decrease operating expenses at the facilities and to maximize operational funds through that. And as well to program all the facilities in Bassano. Saying all that, I'm just going to turn it over to Amanda for the hard stuff now. That's her story.
Thank you. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read all of the supplemental delegate information that we provided late 2 days ago, perhaps, but it's something that you can reference at a later date if you choose to. So I'll give you a little bit of background on that. I'm not sure how far you've made it through your orientation process with regards to the intermunicipal collaboration framework and where we're at with recreation. But we've been working closely with your council and administration for the past 2.5 years on recreation in general and figuring out what we need to do to create some level of viability among the complexities of recreation, recognizing that every community operates slightly differently. Everybody has different facilities and different operating agreements, either locally or with their volunteer user groups. What we established out of this to start with was a recreation funding committee program, whereby the town and the county have 2 members sitting on a grant funding committee, and there's $50,000 eligible for user organizations within the town of Bassano in Division 6 to apply to offset operating funds only within the facilities. So that process is governed by 2 elected officials from each community. So Mr. Reeve, you are now on that. We haven't had a chance yet, but that'll be coming up in the next probably 4 weeks for allocating those funds. And then Councillor Chrisman is also on that. Through that process, we have started to gather valuable information on statistics within the community related to recreation. How many people actually are using X service and facility? What kind of money do these organizations have in the bank? How are they spending them, and what programs are operating? That gave us the foundation to move to phase 2, which was the development of a recreation and leisure master plan. This is important for the town of Bassano because recreation, again, as our mayor has indicated, is a driver for economic development. We saw recreation as a very fragmented process in general, just because there are so many different users and everybody always coming in for some type of funding. So our recreation and leisure master plan really laid out the philosophy of what recreation and leisure is and how it will be considered an asset moving forward. So when you read through that master plan, if you choose to read through the master plan, it's very philosophical and lays out our framework. We didn't break this down to a step-by-step process, again, because every form of recreation is different for us. With that being the case, the 3 facets of recreation that we are talking about focusing on right now is engaging with our user groups. Most of the user groups that operate municipally owned facilities are doing it on a case-by-case basis, and they don't necessarily have capital plans in place. And they also are, let's just say in our joint use facility, there's 5 user groups that are operating in it at different times of the year. They might not have good cost share agreements between them to even cover the power and things like that. We need to establish what those working relationships are going to be, as in what role the town is going to have versus the user groups moving forward. That is fundamental for us to establish what our relationships will be and how that will link into funding agreements amongst everybody as we progress. We hope to achieve 2 user agreement review rewrites this year. This is a pretty big task. I'm sure you can imagine that it's not just one individual in each one of those organizations, and we need to be careful not to give special treatment to one and not to the other, so we really have to understand the user's needs. We will be focusing on that, as well as then working on business case analysis for the facilities that the municipality owns and operates. So a couple of those would be the outdoor pool as well as the Thrive Fitness Center. Both of them are not even nearly at a point of cost recovery, but we need to determine whether or not they're feasible long-term. So for example, with the Thrive Fitness Center, as a result of COVID and a number of other things, we'll just look at the footprint in general being 500 square feet. There were 13 active users. This is costing both municipalities a fair chunk of change, like $15,000 is enough if it's not well utilized, but we need to understand why it's not well utilized and if it should be moved. So these business cases that we'll be working on will help give us that information to determine, do the partners want to continue funding these recreation assets? In addition to the Thrive Fitness Center business case, we've also developed an operations master plan for the Bassano outdoor pool, and that was done since this master plan has been endorsed by the county as well as town council. That master plan lays out for us all aspects of youth development and leadership. So when kids are starting their swimming lesson program, all the way up to when they're in their 20s, how they will move through the process of being active members in our community, and then this is done in partnership with the school. So all of these plans have to be put in place and actually implemented to ensure that recreation is viable for all of the members. Those are a couple of the things that we're working on operationally this year, as well as when we talked about lowering operating costs, we've submitted grant applications to the MCCAC program for energy efficiency upgrades at the facilities, and that would be to do lighting projects. They had a little bit of a pause on funding those grants. Now we're back into the queue again, and I anticipate that we will get funding out of that. So when you refer back to the supplemental documentation, it does lay out what our multi-year capital plans are, as well as the operating budget. So the operating budget for the 2022 year is $225,000 per partner, and then the capital plans that we have listed out is $84,500 per partner. Now, many of these plans had already been approved previously because we present them on a 3-year basis, so it's not a big change to what we had already discussed. The capital plans include a fire alarm upgrade to the joint use facility, which is already complete, and that had started last year. And then we are looking at doing controller upgrades at the pool, the lighting efficiency upgrades, as we had mentioned. We have indicated in here that we anticipate getting the grant funding, but if we don't, we want to ensure that everybody has planned to help cover their 50% contribution to that. Door upgrades at our community hall and dishwasher upgrades to keep that facility up and running. And then in addition to that, just general programming of these facilities. So what we've found with all types of recreation is that you have the facility and the asset, but they're sitting vacant for 60% of the year. That's not a good use of taxpayer dollars either. So how are we going to solve that challenge? A lot of that comes back down to ensuring that there's staff and community members allocated and dedicated towards those facilities. So with the endorsement of that plan, we have hired a full-time public works and an administrative assistant to assist with the implementation of that master plan, which you will see in the budget as has been previously discussed. So that allows us to do programming, which we had not planned before. That's a brief overview of what our plans are for 2022, if there's any questions.
Thank you both for that presentation. Are there any questions from council? Matt, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank Amanda and the mayor for coming out. They've done an excellent job in terms of putting some valuable information in front of council. The one action item that we'd need coming out of this meeting is a motion to approve the additional capital expenditures. Most of them are carry forwards, have been previously approved, but the energy efficient lighting as well as the facility door upgrades and dishwasher upgrades. Total cost to the county on those would be $22,500. We'd look for a motion to approve those with funding from the Recreation Fund. But this is great information. We've had a 3-year view of the capital expenses coming at us for, is this our 3rd year? Yeah, so I mean, it's really nice for planning budget and rolling things forward, and everybody kind of knows how a year is going to shake out before you're halfway through the year. So really appreciate the updates.
Yes, I reiterate that. Thank you. Go ahead, Holly, please.
Question for you, Matt. The money coming out of the rec, is that the big rec fund you're talking about, or which fund are we talking?
Yeah, that's right. So the capital items are funded out of the Recreation Fund, the 5, yeah.
Amanda, go ahead, please.
Thank you. There's just one more thing I'd like to point out. It's in the supplementals, but I'll just make sure that we're highlighted here. When we go to engage with those recreation user groups, developing those multi-year capital plans are going to be very important, because right now we have worked through the capital plan based on our infrastructure master plan, identifying where facilities need to be upgraded. We do know that the user groups have a number of upgrades that are required, and we don't want any more of the unknowns. So for example, last year, the curling club came to both municipalities and asked us to assist with funding a condenser upgrade. They had raised roughly $80,000 for that, and it was shared equally amongst the municipalities to cover that cost moving forward. We want to make sure that we've adequately planned for capital upgrades that would be required for all user groups moving forward. So just please understand that we will be making amendments to the capital plan and present them accordingly.
Thank you for that. Kelly, your hand is up virtually. Please go ahead.
Good morning. My question is around the fundraising that you're planning to do later in the year. That is also for community hall upgrades and dishwasher replacement. How will that affect this decision today?
Thank you. That's a very easy question for us. So what we have done with that dishwasher upgrade, to be honest with you, we've already completed the upgrades. We did a bunch of repairs to it this year that now work. But what the process was is we received a $2,500 donation from White Fox Group, which is the construction company that is doing our lagoon upgrade. There was that, as well as we were going to be working with the Bassano Arts Council for the barbecue competition that the mayor will be speaking to in a moment. Any proceeds from that event were going to be put towards the cost of doing upgrades at the community hall. Of course, anything that comes from that would decrease the member contributions.
Right, thank you. That answers your question, Kelly? Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Do we want to deal with the motion? Yeah, do we have Neil, do you have a motion for us to approve the funding?
I would approve that. Make a motion to approve it.
Okay, that's $22,000 from the rec fund, capital funding. Any further questions? All in favor of the motion, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Go ahead. You've got some more to present.
Yeah, just a couple more things. First, I just want to reiterate how thankful we are for just what you guys, the way that we work together. I mean, I think we work together as municipalities so good, and I'm fairly new at this game. I haven't been in it that long, but what I can see of working with you guys in the county together, it's just been, I couldn't possibly ask for any more than that. You guys have been great at that. The other thing is, June 3rd to 5th, we are having a professional barbecue competition in Bassano. I've been to a few of them before. My son-in-law happens to be a professional barbecue competitor. So it's quite a big deal. There's going to be like 30 teams, and we got on June the 3rd, the evening, there's like be a concert that's going to be put on by Bassano Arts Council, as well as there'll be a beef on the bun supper, and lots of activities on the Saturday. The actual professional side of things get kicking off on the late Saturday night. By the time they start cooking on Sunday, that'll be theirs, and with the big awards stuff happening on the Sunday evening, probably around 6 o'clock or so. They've been the community has been really, really good, and we've got all our sponsors pretty much lined up now, as well as donations being made by the Barbecue on the Bow Society, and just people have been great about it. So it's we're planning on it. It's a pretty big event, I think, and it's the first time, and it's, in my mind, it's going to be an annual thing. So I just want to invite all you guys out. Come on out for the Friday night, Saturday, both Sunday. It don't matter. Just pop out. It's going to be a fun time, I think. So, and oh yes, and there is a competition for the amateur side too. Maybe some of you guys might want to get involved in that. There's a steak cook-off for that. So that'll be on the Saturday, and that'll involve, it is amateurs, and you cook on your own device, you bring your own, whatever you want to bring on, whatever you want to cook on, and there'll be also a trophy and some awards for that, but more importantly, it's more of a, I guess you could say, a competition thing, so against your peers. So whoever would like to compete in that is that's good, and the steak will be provided for that, and that's be donated by another group as well. So failing that, that's all I got to say, and thank you very much. That's what I got to say.
Excellent. Thank you for that presentation. We feel the same. Value our partnership very much, and look forward to the future. And just on a side note, I did meet somebody in Edmonton last month who was talking about the barbecue competition and planning to be there. So Bassano's the place to be, June 3rd to 5th for sure. So thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah. Okay, let's move to 11.2. Lane, you're going to present to us, and then Sharon and Alan are here for the Village of Rosemary immediately following that. Thank you. Go ahead, Lane.
Good morning, Council. So item 11.2, we're wanting to provide just an update for Council on an initiative that was begun in 2020. Now, Councillor Holly Johnson was involved with that particular initiative. In, I think it was 2015, 2016, the Council of the day requested that we go through and prepare details about all of the recreation facilities in the county. There was a fairly extensive report that was prepared, and it was identified through that report that there was a need for funds to be set aside to make sure that we were in a position to upgrade and replace recreation facilities as they aged. Beginning in 2017, there was an amount that was set aside on an annual basis into a reserve account. And the information that I have shared with you indicates what the status of that is. We still continue to allocate funds through the budget process for upgrading recreation facilities and funding major recreation initiatives. The community engagement process that we went through started in 2020 was to invite the recreation organizations throughout the county to provide input for council on how those funds should be dispersed in the future. The outcome of that process was a policy that has been put in place. It is a fairly new policy in that there has yet to be any applications received for funding from community groups or other municipalities under that particular policy. So that information is being provided just as a background. We do have a request that has come in from the Village of Rosemary, and we wanted to make sure that council was up to date on the status of that Recreation Reserve Fund and the policy that flowed out of that community engagement process that was begun in 2020 and concluded in 2021. If there's any questions, I can attempt to answer them as it relates to that policy and the fund itself.
Thanks, Lane. Holly, go ahead.
So I'm looking at your paperwork here. So the Duchess Ag Society and the Bassano Curling Club did not go through the form that the committee developed. They were just given a grant out of it?
Now, refresh my memory, so that was the request, no, that was actually through a separate application that was submitted directly to council. And I think that if I recall correctly, their request had actually come in before we concluded that process. It was right during that period of time.
So the request today from Rosemary is the first time we're accessing that grant that we developed the form.
And that would be able to provide some additional information, but it's my understanding this is the first group that has come in since the policy was approved.
Yeah, and just for context, with our municipal partners, we've got I was going to say hodgepodge, but that doesn't sound very technical, but different agreements, right? So the town of Bassano, we've got that 3-year capital schedule in place. We see it with the Village of Dutchess, capital's on a case-by-case basis. The City of Brooks, we had a 5-year capital program coming at us, and Village of Rosemary, we're on a case-by-case basis until we get our recreation agreement updated. So the village has prepared their application with reference to this policy and reference to the other agreements that we have in place on a case-by-case basis. But this does kind of give council a frame of reference. What we're looking for from the communities is some skin in the game, right? So the local community contributes an amount, and it makes it a little bit easier for council to allocate resources and filter out which projects should be priority for you.
Thanks, Matt. Go ahead. Dan?
Is this funding only available to our neighboring municipalities, or is it available to our hamlets? And it's available to everyone within the county, is that right?
Yeah, so this policy specifically is for application to countywide. Where we have ICF agreements in place with the villages, the town, the city, the provisions of those agreements take precedence.
Okay, thanks. Neil?
Is population taken in, like the per capita calculations done on any of this, or is it just, to use your word, hodgepodge?
Case by case, right? So when we look at funding and where it goes, I mean, we've sliced and diced numbers every which way, like who should get what amount and based on what measure. Is it assessed value of properties, the number of people? We've looked at it every which way. The setup of the recreation fund itself, the first intention was to be in a position for the county when requests come in to replace the existing recreation infrastructure, that we had funds on hand to entertain that. And that's what I think we're going to see today with the village request, is it's to replace that tennis court, which is very clearly aged. Recreation is a really interesting one because it has evolved in each area of the county, largely through volunteer efforts and other organizations, ag societies who have championed the recreation cause, have put up minor hockey rinks, managed the golf courses. So it gets pretty hard to get it down to as simplistic of a metric as this area gets X amount per capita, because, you know, a place like Tilley has the ice surface, they have the curling rink, but you get out to Scandia and they have the hall and a park, right? So, yeah, we look at it every which way. That's kind of a long answer to your question. But we don't have a set metric saying, well, this area gets X amount per capita and that's all you get.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Holly, go ahead.
Because this is a difficult area to wrap our heads around, we've talked a bit before, Lane, we kind of had a breakdown of the county facilities somewhat, but just in terms of everything together, what the Duchess and Rosemary and Bassano have as well, kind of in one package might be helpful, because it is really difficult when there's different amounts going over the place. I would appreciate that anyway.
That's a fair request. We can certainly do that.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I think we'll move forward with the presentation from Rosemary, Sharon Zacharias, and Alan Eastman. If you come up to the mic, and Lane, you'll stay with us in case there's some more questions. And I understand. Welcome to all of you. We can have introductions in a minute. I note, as per the previous suggestion, that this is pioneer work here today, so we all get opportunities to be pioneers from time to time, so we look forward to that today. Let's introduce ourselves. Neil, go ahead and start.
Neil Johnson, Division 10, Round Brooks.
Amanda Philpott, Duchess area.
Greg Screever, Lake Mill Resort and Castles.
Arno Dirksen.
Matt Fensky, nice to see you again.
Holly Johnson, Scandia, Rainier, Bow City.
Adina Scandrip, Division 2, Tilley area.
Dan Short, Division 1, Rolling Hills.
Lynette Kopp, Division 3.
Good morning. I'm Kelly Chrisman. I'm from Division 6, the west side of the county.
Right. Go ahead.
Sorry, Pam Elliott, Admin Assistant Planning and Development. Hi, Alan.
Emma Sinclair, I'm here doing a practicum and observing.
Sandra Stanley. Hi, Alan. Good. Just in terms of time, we have a public hearing starting at 11:30, so we're tight for time this morning, but welcome here. Appreciate you coming to make this presentation. Looks good. If I expect council's had an opportunity to read through it, but go ahead. Take us through the presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm Sharon Zacharias, CEO of the Village of Rosemary, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today to do this presentation. We'll try and do it quick. I'll say a little bit about the project and then get Ellen to maybe say something about the need in the community. So as indicated, this is a community project. It is for replacement of basically the foundation of the current tennis court and to revitalize it into a multi-sport court to meet the needs of just a broader community, but get it a little bit more specific. One being about 60% of it to be more tennis and pickleball area, and we're quite excited about that as pickleball seems to be coming quite very popular amongst all age groups. And the other part would be focused more on the basketball side and possibly another, like a volleyball court. The thing about this facility is it right now resides technically or legally on Grassland School Division property. And this truly has been a community effort in the past to actually build it and just to keep it updated through the years. It was built in the 70s and it's had several upgrades and facelifts, but this time it needs some major work done to it to make it functionable again. So the challenge has always been whose court is it and who takes responsibility for it. So as a village, we have decided to put a request forward to Grassland School Division, and which also was to the Minister of Education, to actually have this portion of the school property be subdivided and brought into the village. So that process is underway. Our MPC approved that on the past Tuesday. So this, along with some of the other park area that basically are mainly the village and the Ag Society has been funding and investing in the past, will be part of the Village of Rosemary property. So we're quite looking forward to that. And so what we have been able to do as a community, we've been working on this for about 18 months already. It is part of our recreation plan, which was presented to a group here at the county that when we were looking at our recreational agreement, we had this as part of our 5-year plan. And so this is a year that this was slated for. And we were also actively looking for grants to help fund it and also community support. And so the support for right now has come in dollars from our Friends of Rosemary School Association. So that would be the school contribution, and recognizing that the school kids use this on a daily basis. Also from the Rosemary Ag Society, which they normally champion most of the capital/recreational projects in the Village of Rosemary. So they've committed to it, and then also the Village of Rosemary. And so based on this policy, we're asking for the county to also become a funding partner to represent a partnership and working together type of agreement on the recreation for village and county residents in the area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. Any questions from council? Holly, please.
Questions. So Sharon, previously I heard about you the disc golf that's quite popular there, but unfortunately there's no way of recouping any people who are using it, even they're out, people contributing to it. So this looks the same kind of thing where there's not going to be a way to have people contribute to using it. Are you looking at that as a way of some financial support for it?
Typically tennis courts in the cities, I think the city of Brooks can be like this, Dutchess and Bassano. Typically those are recreational facilities that are just open in the public park spaces and just available to anybody as they would want to utilize it. Actually, I've never heard of anyone charging for it. Maybe inner cities they do, but what ends up happening with a lot of these kind of, if you want to say, free for anybody facilities, that's where your nonprofits come into play for fundraising and such from your community members, which would be an indirect way of creating revenue for upgrades and replacements, and that's what's been happening in the past with this court.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Dan, please, go ahead.
What would the county's portion be cost-wise to this project?
What our request is for 50% of the cost. We're estimating the cost to come in about $170,000, so half would be $85,000, and that follows the policy guidelines that have been put out by the county.
Great. There is in our package there is a request for $85,000. Thank you. Matt, please.
Just wanted to thank Sharon for kind of taking this, it's kind of coloring outside of the lines on the policy, but she did take our new policy form for a test drive, and I think she's provided some great information. I think the pictures say picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And looking at these photos which are attached, the facility's clearly beyond any useful life. So. And in terms of the 50-50 cost share, it's very similar to what we have with Town of Bassano, Village of Dutchess, and what we were looking for with the Village of Rosemary to come with in terms of having some skin in the game. So, in terms of the policy, this one checks all the boxes, and this is what the Recreation Fund was initially set up for, was to rehab our existing facilities when they came to the end of their life.
Thanks, Matt, and I think if you've read the presentation, it's exactly right. I think Lane's presentation also puts it into context for us. So, anything else from Kelly, go ahead, please. I missed your hand there. Thanks.
Thank you. I have two questions. The Recreation Master Plan, I don't seem to have a copy on file. Would you forward that to us again, Sharon, please? Or does Matt, do you have a copy that you can forward us?
We didn't have what I would call a master plan, but what we had was a capital plan, part of it. And it had approximately 3 items on it, and this being basically the main item on the plan.
Oh, okay. You referred to a Recreation Master Plan, so I thought you had one. The other question I have, since you've taken our policy and our plans for a test drive, are you any closer to signing a recreation agreement with the county?
Go ahead, Sharon.
We'd be happy to sit down and chat with you again about a recreational plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, just on that point, on the recreation agreement, we had punted that one, I think, until May, June to pick up the conversation again. So it's still live on our radar, just we're not in the trenches currently on it.
Right, so that's in context, I think.
Thank
Anything
you.
else? Thanks, Kelly. Oh, Lane, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if pickleball is one of the sports that's going to be played on this facility. And I think we've got a pickleballer here that could give us some information on just what the benefit would
Okay,
be.
Alan, a quick rundown of the importance, please.
Yes, thank you. It's nice to recognize still a few in here. It's a multi-use, which we're excited about, but I have to admit that pickleball is our main excitement. And I might have had a little bit to do with it coming back from Mesa 3 years ago, play a lot of it down there. So we've got a lot of excitement now in Rosemary. The guys are going winter to Dutchess to do it, but summer we'd like to get that court going. It's the fastest growing sport in North America if you look into it a little bit, played by any age. It's a great, great sport. So we're really excited about maybe getting this going in Rosemary. And of course, anything we can do to enhance these small communities to get people, young people to want to stay or have a reason to bring family is what we're interested in too.
Thanks, Alan. I have one more question. This is going to be a paved surface, or is there going to be a poly sport court surface above the pavement?
It is going to be the poly poured court surface.
Sport court.
No, it's not going to be the tiles. It's
Okay.
going to be, it's kind of basically typically what they do in tennis courts still.
Okay.
But there's different qualities, and we'll get a quality that is conducive to all sports and particularly pickleball.
Okay, good. Thank you for the presentation. Council, ready to make a motion on this, or do we want to delay it till after? If someone ready to move on this? Dan, please.
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we approve that the funding request through that new recreation fund. Take it for a test drive and see if it goes through.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate. Oh, Kelly, do you have a question? Go ahead.
So my question was, will we receive backup and follow-up information as part of this agreement?
Matt, maybe you can cover the standards.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying, as the project progresses, Sharon will submit invoices with supporting backup, and we'll release payment on that basis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the funding, please indicate. That is carried. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation this morning.
Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, yeah, we need a motion to move into a public hearing, please. Amanda, all in favor that we move to a public hearing, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. That is item 7.1, public hearing. Maria, do you have information for us?
I do, thank you.
Thanks.
So this is a public hearing for Land Use Amendment Bylaw 2030-22. The purpose of this application is to redesignate the subject lands from Agriculture General District to Business Rural District to prepare for the sale of the parcel. This parcel is known as Plan 7910693 Block A, which is located directly east of the city of Brooks and once housed a Pan-Canadian or a Petro-Can station and the Humpty's restaurant. So the location is 14.52 acres in size. It was rural business prior to 2019, and then it was zoned back to agriculture as part of an area structure plan cleanup. And now the applicant would like to redesignate it back to rural business. And by doing so, that opens up the parcel for a number of uses that are located in the RFD that I've presented to council. So we did circulate this to adjacent landowners and referral agencies, and there were no concerns heard. It is within the intermunicipal development plan area of the city of Brooks, and they had no concerns. Alberta Transportation says that this proposal could be accommodated by them, and there was nothing else heard. So that's it for public hearing, I suppose. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, one thing, the applicant is here if there is any questions for him.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Neil, go ahead.
Just a comment, Dick owns all the ground around this, and he has absolutely no interest in it, and I think it's a really good project to get it back in, get some new business out there.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Lynette, please.
The water, like there's water holding there and stuff, is there any concerns about any of that, or that's just part of their, like how do they fill it, and do we need to even be concerned about that?
Go ahead, Maria.
That's actually a really good question. So these lagoons are existing from the previous development. I am unsure of the environmental risks that they propose, but should there be a development permit in the future for anything, then we would have to make sure that they would meet the required standards and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions relative to the public hearing? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn the public hearing would be in order. Dan, please. All in favor that we close the public hearing? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. And with that, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I jumped in too soon. If we could do second and third reading if council wishes on this, that would be fantastic.
That's right. Yeah, we'll move to second and third reading of this. Amanda, please, or Adina, please. Sorry.
I'll make that motion for a second reading.
Second reading of Bylaw 2030-22, land use agreement. All in favor of second reading? That's carried. Thank you. And similarly, a motion for third reading. Holly, please. All in favor of third reading, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Maria. With that, we'll move to welcome the delegation from Cypress County, Dan and Terrelyn and Stephen. Join us here. We'll have introductions and welcome. Pleased to have you come talk to us about the linear assessment review. We'll get an education this morning. Maybe we'll start with introductions. Go ahead, Dan.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dan Hamilton, Reeve of Cypress County. I brought with me today Chief Administrative Officer, Terrelyn Nazaruk, and Steve Taves is our assessment, director. He's a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. Thank you. And we'll introduce ourselves too. Neil, go ahead.
Neil Johnson, Division 10.
Amanda Philpott, Division 8, Duchess.
Good morning, Greg Screever, Division 5, Lake No Resort and Castles.
I refer you to the screen, our Deputy Reeve, Kelly Christman.
Hi, I'm from the Bassano area. Sorry.
That's right. Arno Dirksen, I'm from the GEM area.
Welcome, Matt Fensky. Thanks for making the trip out.
Yeah.
Holly Johnson, Scandia, Rainier, Bow City.
Good morning, Adina Scandrup, Division 2, the Tilley area.
Good morning, Dan Short, Division 1, Rolling Hills.
Hi, I'm Lynette Kopp from Division 3 around Patricia Millicent.
I'm Pam Elliott. I'm Admin Assistant Planning and Development.
I'm Emma Sinclair, and I'm here doing a practicum and observing today.
Sandra Stanway, Brooks Bulletin newspaper.
Thank you. Lane? Okay. All right. Thanks, John. Was said, welcome here. Thanks for taking the time to come inform us on the issues today, and the floor is yours, and I know you'll be joining us for lunch, so take the time you need. We look forward to the presentation.
So yeah, we're just going to hand out some part of the presentation for you.
Sure.
I guess we'll go back to this started back in 2020. We all of a sudden found out that industry was speaking with the government behind their back on linear assessment and what was taking place, and we found out that we didn't have anybody for rural at the table at all in the government. So we tried to spring into action as quick as we could and get some people in there, and we've got some progress going. We have the last conversation we had with Mr. McIver, he assured us that somebody would be able to be at the table with the negotiations on linear assessment. So that was a huge step to get that in place. But there's lots to discuss here, so I'm going to give it to Steve to go through this with you. I've asked him to dummy it down for us a little bit, because he gets into his language and it gets hard to understand what he's saying. So if you have any questions when he's done, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And like you said, we have lunch too, so we can discuss more at that time. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Like you had mentioned, my name is Stephen Taves. I'm the Director of Corporate Service and Chief Assessor at Cypress County. Some of my extracurricular, I'm on the Executive Committee of the Alberta Assessors Association, and I hold the chair of Rural Director. And through the Alberta Assessors Association, I've been appointed to what's called an executive advisory group for the province. So we give timely, our terms of reference in that executive advisory group is to give timely strategic direction to the province on their centralized assessment issues. So, yeah, and today, just a really, really short, quick agenda. We're going to talk about assessment and taxation. While those two items are very closely connected, they're also very, very separate, and they're separate for a very important reason. And we'll start to work through these. So as Mr. Hamilton had mentioned, there's been a long-term decay, probably since of the assessment base happening since 2016. And it's done through small changes through policy. And it was going to be that time where the disruptions were small enough that nobody really stood up and said, hey, wait, what's going on? But now those decay of policy and the reduction of the base, it's an amounted to a large scale, right? And just as Cypress is feeling it, I'm sure Newell is feeling that same decay of the assessment base. Okay. Also, I read some of the strategic policies, and I noticed that the County of Newell, that's on your next business, also on your advocacy piece. So this is timely, probably, to have this presentation. So moving on to the next page of assessment. So what is assessment? Basically, assessment is the tool to equitably distribute the tax burden. Sounds kind of romantic when you say it that way, doesn't it, right? So the reason for assessment is so we can fairly distribute providing service, right? That's it. That's its basic function. And it seems like in some cases, and certainly through this assessment model review, that maybe those basic principles were forgotten about. And we kind of left off somewhere, and we forgot about the foundation. We kind of built beside the foundation on the sand, if you remember back to how the model review went. And so on the bottom of that, so our system, it's an ad valorem system, so it's according to value. So the property you hold in a municipality identifies your ability, your wealth, to contribute to the tax burden. So we can in turn provide back services to the ratepayers, taxpayers. As assessors, we prepare, then communicate, and then we also defend those assessments. And the principles, the basics, remember we said back to basics, that assessments should be easy to understand. Assessments should generally be representative of the value we find. So if you have about $1 million house and you have about $1 million compressor, the assessment should be about $1 million. And we'll find later on that that's not actually the case. Okay? And we're looking for that equity piece, right? And I should say, if it's okay with the chair, if somebody has a question as I'm rambling on, please ask the question if that's okay with you.
Sure, absolutely, and we'll interrupt if we need to, but
Thank you.
appreciate that. Yeah, thanks.
And also, assessment should be free of tax policy. Some may say tax reform, and others will say loophole. But when we talk about hiding the business of tax policy, incentives or otherwise, we start to hide things that we're doing. And really, as assessors or in government in general, all we have is the public's trust. And if we're doing business without being frontward facing, you know, quite quickly it's destined to fail, put it that way. Okay, so we talked about the difference of assessment and taxes and taxation, right? So taxation, it's the primary revenue tool for many municipalities, if not all. But the process is that the assessments council designates an officer, and you're in very good hands with Kevin in your office, but council designates a designated officer to take care of Part 9 under the Act. It's to do your assessments for you. And then as elected officials, you get the autonomy to set tax rates. Okay, you get the autonomy to govern and set tax rates how you choose. So you appoint a designated officer. We don't have a friend or a foe in it. We just do what's right. And then the elected officials get to determine the levers they put on those property classes. And then it's quite simply, taxes are just calculated by the rate set by council and the assessments determined by the designated officer. Right? Much of this isn't going to be anything new, but I'm being obtuse for the fact that I think the province isn't considering these basics when we get into these new model reviews. Okay, so the MGA 354 lays out the powers and also restrictions of setting tax rates, and I think I noticed the tax rates came recently. Okay, so you're very, very familiar with that process. And so it gives powers and gives restrictions all at the same time. Okay. Moving on to the next page. If I've lost it, I've been flipping and not mentioning, but it's the page with the pictures now. yeah. So this slide just shows the difference of property types. So one thing we talk about is equity. We talked about fairness earlier on. And there's two types of different fairnesses. There's a horizontal fairness and there's a vertical fairness. So horizontal fairness means fairness between a house and a compressor station. Horizontally across different property types, and also farmland would be included in that. And then vertical equity exists at the $40,000 house and the $3 million house. So in that class of property, there's fairness, and in the different types of classes, there's also fairness, right? That's in a market value system. And then we also have a regulated assessment system. So there's properties that are regulated. Okay. Regulated, and I'm turned the page. So the regulated property types, the regulations are important so that people or property types that don't sell often, if we're determining market value, that's easy. A house sells, and if it sells for $500,000, the market value of the house is going to be about $500,000. But properties that don't sell very often need to have regulations put upon them so that we can account for the value, right? So it's properties that rarely sell or never sell. Or they have heavy regulations on them. You know, we're talking about properties like regulated by the AER, AUC, and these types of property. And also the CRTC, like the communication type towers, right? So they have regulations that may they may have greater costs building that property because of these regulations, so they might give some consideration to the value in that. So the reason why I'm bringing up these two different property classes, turning the page, is some of that tax policy that we talked about earlier is happening in these assessments. So we would want to have, or we would want to be assured that there's equity amongst these regulations that we have to follow as assessors. And then the elected officials can place on the tax rates that they deem appropriate, and that's your autonomy, that's your power. Right. Does anyone remember, can I ask a question, if anybody remembers the shallow gas tax rebate initiative? So I think that was about 2018 that happened, and through enough advocacy and lobbying of the provincial government, they gave shallow gas producers a 35% discount on their assessment. And the first year they did that through the school taxes, and then municipalities wore that reduction the year after in 2019. Yeah, Newell and Cypress were arm wrestling for how bad of a hit we took. Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about that fairness and equity. When we look at, so now we're back talking on assessment. We kind of touched on tax policy, but here's where that's happening now in assessment. Here's where the lines get blurred. If you spend $1 million on a house, your assessment's going to be about $1 million. We've determined that. If you spend $1 million building a pipeline, your assessments, we think it should be about $1 million, but in fact, it's about $435,000 of assessment. So we start to lose some equity. There's nothing really captured or explained why those are different. Same thing for a well. If you spend about, well, I guess that'd be a pretty nice well if you spend $1 million, but...
Question for you.
Please.
Where did equity go? Yeah, you're $435,000 for a house, or $1 million house as opposed to a...
It's just a reflection of the policy. So it's yeah, thanks for the question. For pipeline specifically, there's a great lobbying effort. See, when municipalities go and discuss these issues, we want to agree on what's fair, and other stakeholders come in asking for the discount. So if we were bartering, we might have an agreeable price, but municipalities come in and barter for what we think is fair, and the other stakeholders are asking for the world. So the agreed price, if you will, if we were bartering, is always lower. So we're starting at the wrong spots. That's just in my opinion, but that's what I see, being in the room.
So the assessments that it was built for, so wind energy is a prime example. You can have a $100 million project, but when it's all said and done, what your assessment is significantly lower. Because that is the initiatives and how we help industry in this province. We give that to them as a reduced assessment because it's regulated.
And that starts right off the first year and then goes down every year after that until it gets down to a percentage.
A residual value.
And that stays at the residual, which is 40%. So right off the first year, it drops significantly and goes down.
Dan, go ahead.
And that's because the provincial government is telling us that's what we can assess them at? Is that right or no?
Yeah, according to the regulations and how the framework of the legislation, they're assessed perfectly. Yeah, the assessments are correct. It's just perhaps
they're basically given a holiday at the provincial regulation level, right? Like it's taken right off the top. It just isn't assessed. It's value that disappears basically from a tax perspective, right?
And that's exactly when I say some person might say tax reform, another would say loophole.
Yeah.
That's exactly
because it mixes those two up, because tax is to generate revenue, assessment is determine value, and basically they're saying we're forgiving that value in terms of applicability to tax policy later on, right?
Yeah, if we have that apples to oranges comparison that you're alluding to, if we have an apples to apples, we can have powers and restrictions through the tax rate.
Right.
And then it's clear, it's transparent, and then we know the business that's being done. But without that apples to apples comparison, things are hidden, and we lose our trust.
Yeah. Got it.
Totally. So thank you, Mr. Johnson, Councillor Johnson, for that question. You can see everyone's kind of there with it. I get really excited talking about assessments, so I'm gonna be mindful of the clock, as you can probably tell. So as Reeve Hamilton was alluding to, on that same page, the $1 million of pipeline is only assessed at about $435,000. Same thing as wells. If you drill a well for $100,000, you get about a $28,000 assessment. Okay, and machinery and equipment. So machinery and equipment is anything doing a process. So if you picture a separator at a gas site, gas and water come out of the ground, and it leaves as a bucket of water and a bucket of gas, or a vessel of gas. So it's doing a process, it's separating, right? So it's changing the natural state. So that's when things meet the definition of machinery and equipment. Now, this is an interesting one, because there is quite clearly some parameters put on this, but it's for a purpose. It was very well described and very well understood back in the day. I think it was about 2005 when this was established. So it's clearly tax policy, but it was for a reason, where we don't know where that other, what's the math on that, 64% went, or 54% went on the pipelines. This one we do. It's quite clearly described. So if you build that $1 million compressor, right away we take off 23%. And then through the age life, through the depreciation as it gets older, we take off another 25%. So the most that compressor will ever get assessed for is $570,000. So you have $1 million outlaid into that machinery and equipment, right? So they get a really nice discount off the start, but it's a nice incentive. And as you know, whenever we give an incentive, we need a bit of a backdoor to make back our incentive. Otherwise, we're just throwing money out the door. And through that age life, so that compressor might be really tired and not much value remaining at all. However, they said when we give that incentive to build, we give you that real nice discount to start with, well, it'll never drop below 40% remaining. So your assessment will never drop below that $400,000 level. So incentive, but a backdoor, and the 40% represented municipal sustainability. Got the discount, that 40% left says, hey county, you can count on this stuff to pay taxes for a long time. The last model review, we forgot all about that. That concept was gone. Now in my, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but when there's that 40% remaining, if you look at that in terms of a car, you know, what does a car look like that has 40% remaining? You know, is there any oil field equipment truly operating safely that doesn't have 40% left? So it kind of did both things. It almost probably represented an operational unit. I don't want to get it too technical, but it almost worked for both things. It was municipal sustainability, and if it was an engineer-approved vessel, it probably still had about that 40% left. Okay, but that seems to be quite forgotten about, where industry was asking for a 10% remaining. So where I learned my math, if we went from 40% left to 10% left, industry would say, well, that's a 30% reduction. I'd say, yeah, that's not bad. We can handle that. You know, we did a 35% shallow gas. We can probably work with that. So wait a minute. Going from 40 to 10, that's a 75% reduction. There's only 25% left now from what we had. So you can see some of this hidden stuff, the work we're doing, right? And I think that's what we're here to talk about. Get it out in the open. Let's not get fooled again. We doing okay? Okay.
The assessment model review then had proposed 90% to 20%. Now, that's still a proposal? It was never, like the industry asked for 10, they're proposing 90-20, and it's just sitting there as proposed, or has it dropped off the 40 already?
Great question. It was absolutely proposed. I think they settled out at about that 20% bottom. And that was, if everyone remembers, when RMA put out all their ranges, so we had Schedule A, B, C, and D, those were kind of the ranges of how things would be effective. So, and then when Minister Allard paused the review and gave some other tax holidays, so it's, I hope we're back to the drawing board. Yeah, I hope. Yes. Yeah. So lessons from the past, let's not get fooled again. How do we move forward? And I think kind of the key message here is let's not fix a perceived tax problem, because we don't know if there is a tax problem. Industry says there is, but we actually don't necessarily believe that. There is. But they're trying to fix that tax problem with an assessment solution, and we're actually going, this is opposite to meet the guiding principles of assessment. Being easy to understand, being generally representative of the value found. Right? Okay. So I would, through the executive advisory group, a couple of the things we've asked for confidentiality on, so I just need to be careful kind of tiptoeing around that. But again, those guiding principles of assessment is that they should be easy to understand, they should be free from tax policy, they should generally be representative of the value found in place, and all these tools lead to trust of the system, trust in our government, and transparency. And I think that's kind of a key thing we're looking for these days, is that frontward facing fairness and openness, right? I think that's what our taxpayers are expecting of us at the same breath. Okay. So from that executive advisory group, we've been told that some consultation will happen, and in a very bureaucratic manner, we will have consultation on how we should consult. Right. So I think that's our opportunity to say we would like consultation that happens transparently. We would like consultation that maybe looks back to assessment as a system. Remember, we talked about those different property classes, regulated and market value. Are they playing nice? I'm not sure if you're aware, RMA put out a couple documents talking about capital stock and a rebuttal to the McKinnon report that said how bad of a job we were doing. Right? RMA put out a couple documents that are really good to describe the uniqueness of Alberta, and that we take care of a lot more than other jurisdictions. So this taxing power that we have might not be enough when we actually look back to other jurisdictions, other provinces. Right? And instead of saying, well, I don't think we should be taxing or assessing and taxing M&E, we need to look at that as a thing. Should we be assessing and taxing that thing? Right. Again, taking a look back to the guiding principles of assessment, and if our focus gets too tight, we might not look at the system with all the properties inputting to our needs and the ability for governments to have the autonomy just to govern. Right? They're starting to decay that. Yeah. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. So what we're trying to get forward and trying to get is everybody needs to understand what's going on here. And as a group of elected officials, we need to be able to go to the province and all say the same thing. We've been in some meetings before. We've been on some buses when we were in RMA and discussing linear assessment, and there is some confusion on it. So that's why we're trying to put this stuff forward and get everybody on the same page. It's not easy to understand it. It's taken a long time, and sitting down with these two for quite a bit to understand what's going on behind the scenes and what's taking place. So I understand if you guys have a lot of questions or are confused on stuff, because it does take some time to get figuring that out. But that's the key that we're here for, is just to get everybody united, get it figured out together, and go to the province together as a group. Tara Lynn, did you want to add?
And I think further to Steve's comments is that it's not an assessment issue, it's a perceived taxation concern. Yeah. And assessment is true, it's pure, and that is the component that we use to evaluate. And to mess with that will destroy trust in the system. So that needs to be differentiated between that. That's a guiding principle. And then we need to all ensure that the province knows that, and that we need that system to be pure for public trust. And then municipalities, councils have the ability, because under the MGA, you determine the programs and services for your ratepayers. And so you need to have that ability to have a mill rate tax rate that is appropriate for what you deem appropriate. And by starting to integrate the two is destroying a system that has worked very well for many years. So that's why we're here today.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's understandable. It's a good presentation. I mean, this is a misalignment at the very basic level that can't be corrected for unless it's fixed at some level, right? I mean, it's pretty basic. It seems to me. And I appreciate your presentation to us this morning and the lead you've taken on trying to resolve that. I think we want to work together to try to get some action on this. Yeah. Matt, go ahead, please.
But I just wanted to point out, you know, Cypress and Newell are heavily impacted by any changes to linear assessment. So I previously sent out a tax rate comparison. So when industry comes knocking on Newell and Cypress County doors asking for a reduction in their tax bill, we're already 35% below the municipal average. Cypress is even further than that. I mean, if we were taxing at an average tax rate of, what is it, just about 14 mils, we'd have more in the kitty in reserves. We'd have a fully funded infrastructure plan. I mean,
might not be buying graders.
Might not be. Then there's maybe some room to have, you've got that flexibility baked in, but when you're already 35% below the provincial average on your non-residential rates, you don't have as much flexibility to give. I mean, in the province, the maximum non-res rate back in 2021 was 28.6. We were down just under 9. So, you know, Newell and Cypress should be in bed together on advocating for this, because our interests are a little bit different than what you might find elsewhere in the province. So really appreciate the concise summary there on the assessment model review. We don't want tax policy baked into the assessment model. If you're going to give incentives, give the incentives, highlight them, make it transparent, but keep the assessment model pure.
And sorry, and just further to that, so yes, not to bake them, and also to, we provided solutions to not to mess and to bake them together. So yeah, we can forward that as well. We presented that to Minister Allard and to Minister McIver as well. So we can forward that on as too. We could do that.
Appreciate that, because really this is of interest to every county, because every county has value somewhere, and this is taking a big hit on just a certain segment of where value and investment has happened in some counties. In others, it's pulp mills. It's a whole range of other things that shouldn't be exposed to similar kinds of policy, really. So, thank you. With that, I think we can go to lunch, and we look forward to visiting on this informally. Very much appreciate you coming out to inform us on this today. As you know, for 8 of us, this is our first round in municipal politics and activity. So this is a good education for us on that. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody listening and being interested in it. Yes. It does affect us. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.